What's going on, everyone? Kieran O'Brien here, back at you with a brand new video. And if you're new on my channel, I'm a 21-year-old entrepreneur and digital marketer, and I make all sorts of videos here on YouTube about entrepreneurship, digital marketing, and a lot of car content as well. I'm a big car guy. So welcome to my YouTube channel if this is your first time. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about what I learned making my first $1 million by 21. And so I want to kind of make this video, there's going to be a few different recurring themes in this. I don't want to talk about like how I made my first million because pretty much everyone knows how I did it. I own a digital marketing company. I actually own two digital marketing companies now. They both do slightly different things. That's how I made the money. But I want to talk about what I think is even more important than how I made the money. I want to talk about what I learned throughout this process. So the number one thing that I learned when making my first million over the last 3-4 years, right, is lifestyle, right? When you start having that kind of money come in, your lifestyle changes a lot, okay? When I first started making like quote unquote real money, when I started making 6 figures per year, I was still living at home with my parents in Virginia, and shortly thereafter I actually moved out to Arizona, to the West Coast, and moved in on my own for the very first time. For the first time I had my own rent payments, I had my car, I had all these things now suddenly that I was responsible for, and all these bills to pay. And so I think your lifestyle definitely creeps up on you a little bit when you start making money, especially when it happens quickly and you don't really have time to react. And so a lot of people, they mess around with their first little bit of money that they make, right? They blow it on stupid things, or they spend it in stupid places, or they buy things they don't need, right? And I definitely did that to a certain extent. And lifestyle inflation, is the term for this. It's a real thing. It can really screw a lot of people over. What I think is important and what I learned about lifestyle inflation is that it's likely going to happen regardless. It's all about how well you handle it. So I think the most important thing that I learned is let it happen, but control it as much as you can. You don't want to make a bunch of money and just be terrified of spending it, because then that might lead to, kind of it building up, and then you might have some crazy, financial mistake down the road because all that pent up energy wanting to go out and spend your money. I think it's important to enjoy the process and spend a little bit of money here and there, buy a few nice things, but don't overdo it. Make sure that you're keeping tabs on these things and you're not letting yourself get out of hand. Now, the second thing that I learned making my first $1 million is that $1 million is not a lot of money, right? It might feel like a lot coming in when you're making $20, $30, $40, $50,000 per month. It might feel like a lot of money, but at the end of the day, with taxes, with obviously the expenses that come along with running a business and hiring employees and all these things, right? It really isn't a lot of money at the end of the day. And even $1 million liquid cash net profit after taxes still isn't that much money. That's like 1 or 2 properties in a nice city. And so I think I really realized after making my first million that I was barely scratching the surface, and on the grand scheme of things, I was still a very, very, very small fish in a massive ocean. And my ambition way far exceeds any sort of financial success I've had up until this point. So that was definitely a big mindset shift for me. Now the next thing is how I actually made the money and what I learned about how I made the money, right? Making my first million, I really learned that providing value and solving real-world problems was the only way to make money consistently and predictably. You can get a couple wins here and there. You can invest into the markets, Bitcoin, Tesla stock, whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, to make real, predictable, consistent income that leads up into the high 6-figure, 7-figure mark, you absolutely must solve real-world problems. And so for me, I discovered that helping businesses with ROI-producing activities was the way that I was good at doing that. And so if you're providing a service or something that doesn't solve a real-world problem that people are experiencing, it's likely that you're not going to get to that level of financial success, and you need to figure out how you can actually go ahead and pivot so that you're solving real-world problems and providing value to a large number of people. And probably the most underrated thing that I learned when I was making my first $1 million is I did so much that was, quote-unquote below my pay grade. I did so much for free, so many things where I didn't see really a direct ROI on it, right? Whether that was working for one of my mentors for free, whether that was doing a marketing campaign for somebody pro bono, right? These are all things that I did early on in my career and that I still do to this day. Or even if it's not free, it's at a discount, or I just hook people up as much as I possibly can, because making your first $1 million, it's going to happen inevitably. If you are hardworking, if you have a real product or service, like my last point, that solves a real world problem, it's just a matter of time before you make your first million, your first 10 million, your first 100 million, right? You just need to keep pushing towards that goal. But one of the things that can get in the way is ruining your reputation. Another thing that can get in the way is a lack of networking, right? If you're just huddled away in your office all day, not meeting people, not building your network, not creating relationships, that's a great way to kind of bypass a lot of the the hustle, the grind that people talk about. You don't need to be working 18 hours a day sitting in your office like a hermit, right? There is a big part of entrepreneurship and networking and all these things is actually building genuine relationships with people. And so a lot of the stuff that I did for free, that I did pro bono for people just to help people out, people remember how you make them feel. And so especially early on in your career, while you're working on making your first million, I want you guys to really consider, don't work for free just for the sake of working for free, but really take everything with a grain of salt, judge the opportunities that come your way, and make a good judgment call when it makes sense to go ahead and do something to help somebody out, or just to make them feel good, do something for free, pro bono, or whatever the case is. Oftentimes it'll lead to a very valuable relationship, and it'll lead to monetization down the road. Another thing that I realized while making my first million is that everything becomes exponentially easier, right? It's like a compound effect, the same way that compound interest works. Because as you're making your first million, you're doing a few things, right? You're building up your business's brand. You're building up your personal brand. You're building up your network, your relationships. You're building up your team, right? And so as you're going on and making money and doing these things, making your first $1 million, all of these things are building up kind of silently in the background. And oftentimes you don't even realize it. And then you look up one day and all of a sudden you have all these different streams of income. You have all these relationships that you're monetizing now. You have all of these systems in place that make it so much easier to make money. And so as you're building your business, maybe you're only making 5, 10, 15 grand a month, but you're building those systems that become the core for how you can scale your business. You're building those relationships that become the core for monetizing your personal brand down the road. You're even building passive income by maybe starting a YouTube channel like I'm doing right here. This YouTube channel has become a decent source of passive income for me without me even realizing it, just because I'm trying to provide value to people on the internet by sitting in front of a camera, right? And so these are the types of things that happen over time, and money starts to compound as you're doing these things, sometimes without you even realizing it. Now, the next thing I learned is just the basic investing principles, right? So whether that's with my stock market portfolio, with the money that I play around with in crypto, with the different investments that I make, even the cars that I buy. I talk about this a lot on my YouTube channel. Every single car that I've purchased up until this point has been a smart financial decision and an investment for me. And so I've really learned, making my first million and early on in my career, I've learned the importance of making the right investments and making smart choices with your money as you're growing it. And that's really become a staple in my life. I'm making sure that I'm investing a certain percentage of my income. I'm making sure that I'm only purchasing things that are going to provide value in one way or another. And that's become definitely a core principle that I live by as I've been making my first million and everything to come. All right, and now the last and probably the most important thing that I learned when making my first $1 million was abundance. Having an abundance mindset. When you make your first $1 million and you kind of sit up one day and you're like, holy crap, I just did that. That's really the way that it happened for me. I didn't really notice that it happened until I went just a few months ago and I checked my invoicing software and I added up all the years from 2016 up until now 2021, and I added up, it was well over $1 million. And I honestly didn't even realize that had happened. And that's really where the abundance mindset comes in. When you are so dedicated to your craft, you're so dedicated to building your business that you don't even realize that these things are happening, that's really when you have that abundance mindset. When you don't see any end in sight, you're not worried about money, right? That's the mindset that you need to have as you're scaling your business. Everything in life is abundant, right? And you need to have the mindset to be able to think that way so that you can go ahead and keep reinvesting back into yourself, reinvesting back into your business. And I know you guys hear this everywhere, but it really is so true. One of the concepts that I really love is burn the ships, right? The burn the ships concept. When you have cash sitting that's not being invested either into, whether it's the stock market or back into yourself or back into your business, you need to be investing your money as you make it into something, right? Money sitting around in a bank account or cash sitting around is not a good use of your money. And so that's one of the concepts that I really learned is burn the ships. Get that money out of your checking account. Make sure you're investing it smartly. Make sure you're investing it consistently. And that's one of the most important concepts that I learned making my first $1 million was how abundant everything is in life, really building up an abundance mindset for myself and realizing that there's so much more out there even beyond just your first $1 million. So guys, I really hope that was helpful. I wanted to just touch on some of those points. I'm more than happy to dive into any of those for a future video. If you want to just drop a comment down below, let me know some future video recommendations. If you want me to go in depth on any of those topics I just talked about, I'm more than happy to. But with that being said, guys, please subscribe, like this video. It really helps me out a ton. I'd really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.